and Michelle. Am I going to butcher your last name? No way. Pettinato.
Perfect.
Awesome. Between the lot of us, we have over 100 years of combined experience on tour and mixing sound. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Here.
I'm not going to go into a lot of time going over everybody's backgrounds because every single one of these women, including myself, have a page on the soundgirls.org website. You'll hear us reference that a few times today as we answer some of your questions. But man, there are some really beautiful in-depth articles. You'll get a sense of their background, their personality, how they got their start, and some good tidbits. I encourage everybody to get in there and check out the soundgirls.org articles and the podcasts because they're awesome. So check those out. I think let's just jump right in instead of spending a lot of time on everybody's background. That we got a lot of really great questions from the Soundgirls website and from Facebook, and I want to make sure and hit as many of them as possible. It's been a crazy COVID season and the industry shutdown has affected everybody in different ways. But the one thing we all have in common is we stopped working. We're all getting back into working all together again. And so this is actually a great time to get going as a newbie, to get back into things if you're a seasoned veteran like ourselves. And that kind of brings us to our first question for the panel. This comes from Jacqueline, and she wants to know, when did you guys all know that you were ready for the big leagues, from front of house, doing concerts, festivals, etc.? What challenges, if any, did you face during that time? Amanda, if you don't mind, we could start with you. I know after checking out your Sound Girls article and just knowing you personally that you actually got an offer from a musical director and production manager who you knew back when you were in school. And is that right? You guys had networked?
Yeah, we knew each other in high school, actually. So kind of like grew up together and our parents know each other. So it was a very personal connection with Janelle's production manager and tour manager.
And you had been mixing clubs up to that point. So when did you know, like, I'm going to go into festivals and big shows and everything's going to be cool?
Well, before I got the Janelle gig, I was mixing on a cruise ship. And I just did not want to go back on the cruise ship. And I had known, my friends had been working with Janelle for like 5 years at that point. So I knew that I just wanted to, after doing the cruise ship, I was like, it has to be something more. I really didn't have a vast knowledge on the touring world. I just knew they were on tour with her and, you know, she must need sound, or somebody who is doing touring needs sound. So how can I figure out how to get to that, the touring world? I didn't have really a clear understanding of festivals and all that. I just wanted to get into the touring world. So I didn't have a moment of like, oh, I'm ready to go to the big leagues. Like my first tour was Janelle, and that's kind of big. So it was just like, I was just thrown into it. It's like, oh, this is what it is. At this caliber, working with this caliber of artists at this level of doing sound, you know, doing shows. Oh, this is touring. This is a top level. I didn't have a moment of, oh, I'm ready for this. I actually feel like I'm at that moment in my career now to like move up to another level of mixing and touring. I'm kind of having that moment now. Not when I was, you know, first starting. I'm just like, I'm ready to move to another level of doing audio and doing what I do as a front of house engineer.
Yeah, and you totally got thrown in and did kind of a sink or swim, and obviously have been thriving. Michelle, you started with Spin Doctors and and reading your article on Sound Girls, people will see that you credit your early days having to mix, quote, whatever crap PA was hanging there. And you actually got, with Spin Doctors, went from doing crappy clubs where nobody cared that their speakers were hung backwards to opening for Rolling Stones. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, so I'd been doing a lot of work mixing local bands and working clubs and sound companies, even some studio work, and basically anything I could do that was with audio. And I was doing that for about a good 3 years when I was offered my first tour with Spin Doctors. And that was from a classmate that I had gone to the recording workshop and Full Sail prior to getting started. And the tour offer came from a classmate, a friend I made at Full Sail. He was mixing the band and he wanted to get off the road, and they were just about to break open, and he offered me the job. And so at that time I had plenty of experience, from working in the shop, prepping for shows and setting up and mixing street festivals and all kinds of bands. And I even worked at the AV department in an entertainment complex where I was constantly fixing and repairing gear and troubleshooting, as well as mixing in a couple of their venues. And I was just really telling everybody that I met that I wanted to go on tour, but I really didn't want to mix. I actually wanted to be a keyboard tech. So the mixing thing was just like, I didn't even know I was ready for it. But the guys that I had worked with at the entertainment complex, they would always be throwing me on the console. I didn't want to mix, and they saw something in me that I didn't, and they would throw me on the console and then just leave me there, and watch from afar. And, then my friend offered me the job, and we did, I went out and met the band, and we did a show. It was a club show where he mixed to kind of give me, an idea of what the show sounds like. I mixed the next show, and the next day we were on the Horde tour, which was this big like hippie jam band festival tour in the 90s. And we were like the third band on the main stage. So it was amphitheater. So I went right from clubs to amphitheater shows with no sound check, throw and go, 30-minute set. So you've got to pull it together really quick. This was long before digital. So you were starting from scratch every day. There was no throw your file in and just build. It was build a mix from scratch. And it was totally like a trial by fire, but it was great because it really helped me hone my mixing skills and get my mixing chops. So I was able to pull a mix together really fast. And, then 2 years later, we were opening for the Rolling Stones on the Voodoo Lounge tour, playing some of the biggest stadiums in the world, which was crazy, but so at that point I was kind of like, okay, well, I guess I got to put on my big girl pants because I'm not sure if I'm ready for this, but I'm here. So, yeah.
Marlena wants to know, is it okay to be anxious or nervous before the first big gig? Fela, do you remember your first, like, man, there's more than a few thousand people watching me do my thing? And how did you handle that pressure?
Oh, I was super ready. I was, my opportunity didn't hit for 12 years out of school. So the gig right before my big gig, which with Christian, I was working at Claire Global at their warehouse in Mount Vernon, New Jersey. So, I was getting paid no money in New York City, fucking $10 an hour. And I'm seeing all these huge shows come in and out. So I'm seeing Alicia Keys's desk. I'm seeing Beyonce's desk. So I'm looking at the EQs and I saw what they were doing and I knew I was on that level. I could just see, it was like, oh, this is how they mix. Okay, this is how I'm already pretty much doing it as well. So that was when I was like, oh, I'm ready. I just need the opportunity. My opportunity didn't come for like another year. And the opportunity was me just posting my mixes. And I put it on LinkedIn, and that was how Christian McBride found me. The first gig I remember, I was just ready to go. But Harry Belafonte was in the audience. It was at 92nd Street Y, which is a very well-known venue in New York City. So I was just hyped. Like, there was no nervousness because I had done a bunch of crap gigs for over a decade. And it was like, finally, I'm getting to do this. So I was ready. So there was no trepidation because it took so long. So that, I think that's what was different for me. But yeah, I mean, that's the reason why you're doing this though. You're getting better every time. You're hoping somebody sees it. And yeah, so I didn't really have that feeling when I got into it. So
yeah, one of my favorite quotes actually comes from a female pro surfer that being brave isn't the absence of fear, it's being fearful and doing it anyway. And that's not to say that we're like egotistical and we're going to go out there and pretend we know something we don't know. But there's definitely like that fight song sometimes on some of these bigger gigs where we do have to like kind of pump ourselves up. Amanda, I know Monet opened for Prince at the Superdome. What kind of conversation were you having with yourself before you walked out to front of house?
We had a show with Prince before that, which was early on, kind of maybe my second or third year with her. And it was one of his headlining shows at Mohegan Sun, and he had asked her to open. And at that time, I was on a 5D. I had been mixing Janelle, had a show file, everything, and Prince wouldn't let us bring the 5D in. And it was a profile that was going to be there. I hadn't had a show with Janelle on a profile, and we weren't going to be able to load in night before. I had to build a show file, open it for Prince on the offline editor. And every show we had with Prince, it was a lot of pressure on me because he was so meticulous about sound and how a show is supposed to sound. So it was always pressure on me when we did a Prince show. So yeah, I've been nervous, especially that one, because I had to open up a show file with not even knowing, it was literally from scratch, and it's in front of Prince. And I mean, it's Prince, so we're not going to have a sound check, a real one, because he's going to take up all the time. So that's a show I do remember like being very nerve-wracking for me, because it's just a lot of pressure every time. It was a lot of pressure every time with him if we were on a show with him.
Yeah. And that pressure can actually help us become the engineers and touring people that we want to be, right? Like having that pressure gets you growing in that next direction, because you know where the holes are, where you gotta like, dang, I gotta be quicker next time, I gotta be on this, or man, maybe I should have a show file on every single console under the sun and see what's good. Susanna asks, what is the most impactful incident or learning experience that shaped your trajectory of your career, whether positive or negative? Bryony, you tell this great story in your Sound Girls interview about this last minute pressure to set up the opener for Coldplay, mixing IEMs from front of house. Like, everybody go check out the article, check out that story. Bryony, is there anything in your career you can think of that, like, man, that either scarred me and I'm a better engineer because of it, or maybe it was a positive experience?
I've got a couple of horror stories definitely to say, but yeah, similar to Amanda's story with Prince, it was one of those situations where we couldn't bring our own console, and we were going from, I can't remember what we were touring, but we were going from that to an SD7, and that was straight into the Met Stadium. We landed that morning, loaded straight in, again, no soundtrack, and I had the best gig of my life on that because the adrenaline was amazing and it sounded incredible. That was the thing. The stadium sound, you hear it's going to be awful. It's going to be the most nightmare thing. But it was set up so well. And I knew the band well enough to have got that mix down to make it, to make it good in any circumstances. So I was like, it was a massive confidence boost in the end because it worked so well. And they went on to using the monitor engineer after the first show, and they never had good monitors. They weren't happy with the monitors for the rest of the tour because it was so live. What they had from me, it was so done off the hoof of a live engineer that it made their experience amazing. But in terms of learning curve experience, I was doing Billy Ocean at a festival in the UK, and it was a digital console sitting down moment where the console was not playing ball in the line check. So we had to shove it all onto an XL4 in about 10 minutes. And that's a big channel count gig. But again, I really missed the analog festival days because of the adrenaline rush of, it's not like having a digital file where you know vaguely what you've got. You are building from scratch, or kind of, you've got someone else, because the desk was very rarely reset completely, as I'm sure people here will remember. And it was like, you didn't know until the band stepped out on the stage what it was going to be like. And it was the most amazing feeling ever when they all came out and the band kicks in and it's there. And although you've probably got you've got this whirlwind of a few minutes to get that first song into the right place, there's always that moment where, I remember I was doing Laura Marling at a very big festival in the UK, and when she stepped out on stage, her vocal was just there and it was perfect, and I couldn't believe my luck in a way, even though you'd argue that it wasn't luck, it was experience. But there's that element of it being luck or judgment. It's the feeling, and you definitely don't get that nowadays with it all being digital as you used to get with the analog console.
That's amazing. Dana, do you have any memories of when you maybe just got completely flooded with adrenaline and had to make a split decision?
Yes, actually, I was working with a band, a Primavera festival. We were on the main stage. One of the headlining sets sandwiched between Brian Wilson and PJ Harvey. And we had a sound check earlier in the day. Everything was great. And then first note out of the band, the whole right main and the subs were not firing. And yes, you get that spike of adrenaline, but thankfully experience kicked in and I was able to just step aside and let the local crew do their thing and support me. And they eventually got it back up. And then it was the best show I've ever mixed, probably the most fun. So yeah, every show's a learning experience for me in a way. So every room is a new room, different band, whatever it is.
Speaking of rooms, we have a question here about that epic song we all choose at the beginning of our day. Michelle, when you're playing your song or songs and listening to the PA at the beginning of the morning, what are you listening for? And how many changes are you really making between load in and doors?
Yeah, so I have a handful of songs that I use to tune the PA with. The first thing I do is play a song. It's called Liberation Front, and it's from Thievery Corporation. It's all instrumental, but it's got some really great lows, and it's just kind of full range of everything going on in it. And I use that as my acclimation to the room or the venue. So I put that on and I walk the room and I just hear what's going on everywhere, listen to what the PA sounds like right in front of it, and then, get further away into the room and just kind of get my head around, okay, this is what today sounds like. And then after that, I throw on a song by Seal. It's Bring It On. And I use that to kind of dial in the low end. It's got a lot of good low mids and lows in it. Then I'll throw in something that's got some good highs and work on the highs. And then I do, I think it's No Doubt, Hella Good, which has got, the great fat low end and some, real good nasally stuff to work out. So I just have different songs to work on different frequency bands just to kind of get everything sounding the way I want. And it depends on the system and the room. Sometimes I don't do much EQ at all. Sometimes you'll have a great system that's just set up properly and it's a great sounding space. Sometimes if you're using local production, it could just be not not really great and a really bad sounding room. So you'll end up like, I try not to EQ with my eyes because, you know, sometimes I'll just be taking so much out or just doing some radical stuff, but it sounds right. And I look at it and I'm like, that's just awful. But, you know, you got to trust your ears because sometimes you do. But I just try to use the system EQ to kind of take care of anything jumping out in the room acoustics and the PA rather than EQing my mix. I try to do all my mix EQ in the desk as opposed to with the PA. So that's kind of how I do it.
Fela, you were working in clubs before you jumped up to touring bigger shows. What kind of stuff were you seeing touring engineers do between sound check and doors to your PA? Were they ever making poor choices? Did you ever try to talk them out of butchering the EQ? Explain to them about the warm bodies in the room making changes after doors?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give them my idea of the room of what I usually hear, and you know, just let them take it from there. I mean, it's their band, and I'm pretty much I was fine with hands off, like okay, and I would if they needed something, you know, just come in and I'll do it. You know, I mean, most people are, I mean, you know, they're professionals as well. So it's just, you know, they do their thing. And that was never an issue though, to me. I'm never, you know, it was never a back and forth about house EQs and stuff like that. But we normally just listen to each other and it was like, you may want to look for, you know, 2K here, and they'll, you know, they'll take it in consideration, but I mean, use their ears. It's pretty much how I always dealt with him.
Did things change for you when you went from being in your club with your PA and then taking a band and moving around different clubs? Did that experience from your own club shift your thinking a little bit once you got into other people's rooms?
Well, I was nice to the house guy. That's the least you can do if you're in that position. But yeah, and also the thing that helped me greatly that I had a lot of confidence was the fact that I had worked at Claire and I had seen every board under the sun. So that was never terrifying to me. Once I hit the big time, it was like, all right, what console? Okay. So having that experience before I went out of just seeing, like I said, Beyonce's, the Alicia Keys, the U2s, and all of how they did everything, and how, like Michelle was saying, yeah, they do a lot of their stuff in the board. So therefore I could look at the board and see what they were doing, what they were scooping, you know, and it was all the stuff that I was doing at these small clubs anyway. It's not really a difference. So that's what also gave me confidence. It's like, oh, okay, this is what it is. And the fact that while I was working at this $10 an hour job, I was using all of their microphones. So I was using these microphones, or like Florence and the Machine would come through and they would have an Avalon compression preamp setup. So I would take that out to my $50 gig, you know, $30,000 worth of equipment. And I would go to this crappy, you know, Allen Heath board, and I would still hear that difference. Like everybody be like, wow, I was here yesterday and this sounds totally different. And so I respected that, oh, you can tweak a few things, even if you're on this, you know, crappy board, you can take it to another level with changing microphones. You know, I mean, I had more mic, you know, I would bring out a mic package that was worth more than the board. So I really respected that as well. And then I was seeing also what was on the input list for these major artists. So I knew what microphones were on those channels, what EQs they were doing, making mental notes like, oh, okay, so they like to scoop that. And I was seeing kind of the same EQs on all of these boards. So it was like, oh, okay, I see it. And so that was, again, you know, gave me a lot of confidence.
That's awesome to hear that it really isn't about the gear, right? It's about using your ears and relying on what you know to be true about signal
having
flow.
good microphones
I did read that. I did read that you are a microphone junkie and you got a collection that can battle.
Yes.
And you still take your mic package out on every gig?
Yeah. For me, I mean, you know, whether I'm on a 5D or an Allen and Heath, if I have the right microphones, I'm always comfortable.
Yeah. And what's that mic that you're on right now?
Oh, this is a Lewitt LCT 240, which this is only like $150.
But sounds clean, right? You really like that company.
Yeah, totally. I've been an endorser for them for about 8 years. And I now sell these. I'm in my podcast studio as well right now. So when the pandemic hit, we had to figure out ways to get, you know, to let our clients record. So we became dealers for all the major audio companies. So now we sell Lewitt, Shure, Sennheiser, all that kind of stuff. And we created the one-of-one audio kit so that you could take this all around the world, which I have. I've done podcasts in Japan with my musicians. So I've taken like this same setup of like a Focusrite, my laptop, this microphone, and I'll do podcasts in you know, in like my hotel room. So
that's amazing.
and as well as use this as my piano mic for a grand piano. So yeah.
Do you have favorite mixing desks, Bryony? I know that you were probably the youngest to get into touring, hit the road at 15. And, you know, analog, when we all started, was the main squeeze. And you didn't love digital desks, especially the Digico to begin with. Have you guys made up with Digico?
Yeah. I mean, I did take an analog board out on my last major tour. I have to be honest with you. I'm there now in the kind of head around the digital world. I guess I was very lucky because when I was very, very young and the digital consoles were starting to come out, I was on tours. Like I think I did one of the very first tours that the venue, which later became like the venue console, did. I think I did the second tour after Paul McCartney with the support band on that. Before that, I don't know if anybody remembers, there was a Soundcraft, I think it was a 328, had no screens on it whatsoever. It was about, I don't know, maybe like a meter wide. I was on another tour, which was the first tour that ever went out on as a support act on that as well. So I did have a very early kind of introduction to digital and a lot of hands-on. And I did a couple, there was the very first prototype of the Soundcraft VI6, was it VI? Yeah, the VI6 was in a club in London, which I was in quite regularly. So I had a lot of FaceTime with them. I think that might have been the damaging factor in the first place because they were very glitchy and very idiosyncratic. And you know, when you have something as kind of meaty as analog and you know where you're at and you can get your hands on all of it, and you go into this world where not only can you not see everything, but it goes wrong, it kind of freaks you out a bit. But yeah, I've toured Digico now, and I've toured the new SSL console as well. But I did take a Heritage 3000 on my last tour, so I guess I'm on the fence.
What about you, Michelle? Who's your main console squeeze?
Well, I'm in very much agreement with Bryony. I went into digital kicking and screaming, and for the same reason, I like to mix with both hands. I like to have everything in front of me all the time instead of having to be flipping through pages. And so my favorite analog desk was the Paragon, the ATI Paragon. And for digital, I'd have to say the Midas Pro Series, just because after the Paragon, I went to an XL4. And the Midas digital desks, you can drive them like an analog XL4, which is really fantastic. It still has an analog feel, and it sounds better than a lot of the other ones. So that was a key factor for me.
Dana, have you worked with an artist recently who had a ton of background vocals? Lydia is looking for some advice on balancing vocals, blending them together. She wants to know how to make that blend happen and your lead cut through, but keep everything feeling big.
I actually haven't had any background vocals in my last couple tours, but in general, the way I would approach it is, depending on how many backing vocals I would have, say if I had like 2 or 3, I'd have them on a separate bus or DCA from my lead vocal, and have overall compression on that bus for all the different vocals. Also, a lot of backing vocals, I'll do a high pass filter, a bit higher than I would for the lead vocal. So the lead vocal is a bit more full frequency. And then to make them blend, I'd make sure that they're, say if I'm using a certain type of reverb on the lead, I would also be sending the backing vocals to the same, not the same reverb, but the same type of reverb, a different return on their reverb, but basically to make it sound like they're all in the same room together. Also on that reverb, I would do, for the lead vocal, typically I'll do a longer pre-delay so that you're just getting more of the tail and they have clarity and intelligibility.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I sure
Sorry,
do.
I need more coffee. And then the backing vocals, less of a pre-delay.
Yeah. And Amanda, you have vocals, a lot of vocals on tour sometimes, but you also work in a pretty decent sized church, right? So you deal with vocals a lot. What are you up to with these?
That's what I was gonna hop in. It depends all of what Dana said. As far as technicality is concerned, but you have to always keep in mind the style of music that you're going to be mixing to, because you can't approach things the same way all the time, because stylistically it may not work. For example, now that I'm doing more church music, I'm listening to a lot of Christian music, because that's the popular vibe of music now in churches, and the BGVs aren't really hot in the mix. The lead vocal needs to be up front, and then it's you kind of want to make it feel like a choir, even though it's 6 people maybe. So you have to be more aware of the style you're working with, to know how to approach it. Now with R&B, like the Janelle or with LMA, I had live vocal BGVs and tracks, BGV stems. So you have to, again, it's the style. And when you're dealing with those things, you want things to sound like the record. So you may want to have the tracks a little hotter than the actual live, and kind of sneak those live BGVs in to give it the live feel. But you want to stay as close to the record. So it really depends on the style you're working with. If you're working with like singer-songwriter stuff, you may want vocals more out front, background, and the lead. It just really deals with the style and everything that Dana said.
I would also add using panning is another thing that you can really, not only create a great stereo spread, but also keep that lead vocal right in the middle and have the backing vocals either like where they are on stage or surrounding them. But yeah, exactly. It depends on whatever style of music is being performed. Just basically though, yeah, it's if you need a reference of how the artist wants it to sound, listen to the record,
Yeah, but don't do a hard pan. Just like slightly off, because then it sounds crazy.
So Amanda and I touched on that we're working in churches. I actually have a question here from Mercy. She's asking about resources for volunteers, because she's not yet a full-time sound check, doesn't have a ton of time with her other job. So what kind of like social communities she could get into. I just want to touch on for our listeners that Amanda and I are both working in churches with a capital C. We're talking like real gear here, Yamaha consoles. I'm working on the new Rivage console, Axient gear, Mayer immersive audio. Like this is the real deal. So maybe even better than some of the clubs you're going to find in your hometown. Amanda, is your home church looking for volunteers? What kind of experiences can you offer young people coming up in your community?
I always advocate for working at the church, regardless of your belief system, because it's just a good place to cut your teeth. Because most of the time, it's the same thing every Sunday, every week. And the church is going to be more open for you coming in throughout the week to kind of, experiment. So I would say that literally my first live sound job was at a church that I just cold called. A classmate cold called, and I went on his interview with him, and they ended up hiring both of us. And that's how I ended up doing live sound. So I'm a huge advocate for volunteering or just walking up to a church. They're the church. If they act a certain way in a negative way, then that's probably not where you're supposed to be anyway. But yes, cold call, just like go up there. Honestly, this is how I got a lot of my first gigs. I just walked into clubs, I walked into churches and said, I want to help out. And then you can move towards, the payment part of it, but just go up there or call and see if they need some help. And nowadays, especially in this virtual world where, a lot of churches aren't having people inside, they're having to do virtual service. They need help on the production side because they don't know everything that has to happen.
That's awesome. Dana, how would you advise a young person like Rachel who's asking about getting going on the career path and also not being discouraged when you're getting a handful of no's?
So I come from a self-educated background as far as sound goes. I did not go to schools or anything. The way I approached it was just starting off as I asked and a lot of questions of the house sound engineer of the club where I was bar backing and doing door and cooking as a line chef just to be in the club every night. Just asked a lot of questions. And then when I felt like I was gaining some knowledge, bugging people to give me hands-on experience. And then after I felt a little bit comfortable in front of a console, I just started offering bands that I knew, I'll do your sound for free. If you take me out to that regional show, I'll jump in the van. And that's it. Yeah. I mean, you're going to get no's everywhere. You're going to get turned down for jobs, but you have to keep asking. You just have to have the tenacity, really. You can't get discouraged. There's always somebody who can do your job cheaper or better. But there's always a place for you. There's so many incredibly talented engineers out there, and we all started somewhere. So I think it's really important to just keep at it. I mean, there's no, it's just, I got really lucky too. Any band I do sound for at my house gigs, if I liked them and I liked working with them, I'd say, hey, here's my number. If you ever need a touring engineer, take me on tour. And I've gotten so many gigs that way. So just don't be shy.
Dana touched on one of the most important skills is to keep asking and to keep reaching out. One of our questions touches on, how do I reach out without feeling like I'm pestering people? And reading Michelle's article recently, I got a little surge of like, yeah, and I've been in this game for a little while, talking about the special skills that you need to have. And she talks about signal flow, gain structure, basic troubleshooting, networking, and letting everyone you meet know what your goals are. Michelle, could you help elaborate on how to go about that in your network without feeling like you're just bugging everybody, give me gig?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much as saying, give me a gig. It's more so letting people know what your goals are. Like, hey, I want to go on the road. I want to mix monitors. I want to be a front of house engineer. I want to be a drum tech, whatever. Just, make that known to people and also be open to whatever advice they can give you. a friend of mine, he started out as a stagehand, and he would do load in. And when the stagehands got cut, he would stay and he would shadow the front of house engineer, because that's what he wanted to do. And he was doing, like, these were big shows with big time engineers. So he would just go up to the guy and say, hey, do you mind if I just kind of hang out and pick your brain? And some would say, sure. Some would say, no, don't bother me. But, just by being there and showing that initiative, he learned so much for free. And, he got to know these people. So eventually he started building this network of people who knew him, who knew that he really wanted to do this and he was serious, because he showed initiative. So, you almost want to bug people, like when you're trying to get a gig, you almost want to bug them. Like if you're calling a sound company, you want to call Claire Global and say, hey, I want a job. And they say, oh, we don't have anything right now. Call them back in a month. Keep checking. Like you want to be at the top of people's minds. So when they do have an opening, they think about you right away. It's just, you call and say, hey, can I get a job? They say no, and you never call back. You're never going to get that gig. So you just, don't be annoying, like, give me a gig, but what do I have to do to get a job? What do I have to do to work here? Do you mind if I check back with you in a couple of weeks if you're not hiring right now? Don't be expecting the gig, but, be showing them what you can do for them is a good thing.
I'd also like to add
point.
being be super friendly, because doing sound can be a really intimate job. If you're touring, you're living on a bus with 11 other people or however many people. And when you're, you have to, the artist has to trust you and want to hang out with you. So so many of my jobs were just, kicking it with the artists after the show, sharing a drink with them and talking about the night, if it was successful, and just like being their friend. And they're going to want to hang out with you and have you in their corner on the road. So yeah, being personality is so much of the job.
Yeah, I've actually known people who have they were great at their jobs, but they were horrible to be around. So they've lost their gigs, where I've known people who were terrible at their jobs, but were such great fun that they're doing the biggest tours in the world, So
that's something I quote a lot. I say to people, you can be the best engineer or best at whatever you do in the world, but if you're not fun to be around for the 22 hours of the day that aren't the show, then they'd rather have the person who's less experienced and maybe not as good, because it's such a long day of not doing a job in terms of the actual, the show moment.
Yeah. And Amanda touches on that in her Sound Girls interview. Amanda, you guys talked a little bit about that attitude and about coming through the door with a decent attitude. Can you elaborate on maybe how to be cool on the road on a day when maybe you're not totally feeling it?
That's funny. How to be cool. How to be cool is being. Don't try to be cool and you will be okay. It's literally that simple. Don't move in a way that you think someone else wants you to move. Be self-aware and know that you're at work. We get kind of laxed because it is the music industry, on tour, we're hanging out, maybe drinking, doing whatever. But you have to keep in mind that, yeah, we're hanging out and everything, but you're still at work, and you have to maintain a certain amount of professionalism while still being cool. And that means don't be a fan, of course, be a fan of the music. I'm a fan of Janelle. I'm a fan of Ella. I'm a fan of Tegan and Sarah. Like, I listen to their music when not at work, but I'm not trying to be something that I think that they want me to be. And it sounds weird, but it's really that simple. Like, don't try to be something that you're not. And people love authenticity.
I would say that's one of the hardest parts of the job, is doing what you say and actually navigating that road of being friends but not being friends, and being professional, but because you are living with these people. And actually, I think that, and I think that can be particularly true of women in that situation as well, because you're often in the minority more than not. that, you know, it is a very difficult balance to keep. So aside of all the actual skills in your job, we've had this maintaining, being yourself, and yet being professional and keeping your job is really, really difficult, because sometimes you do have to mold a little bit into the tour vibe to get on, don't you?
Yeah, it really depends on the vibe of the camp. You know, it depends on the tour, but at the same time, if you bring your true self and being more self-aware, then you can be malleable and adjust to whatever the vibe is, and people respect that more. I know, being a production manager, I need you to be right here, like in your attitude, and be a good person, because all this other stuff you can learn. Like the podcasts like this and Sound Girls and other resources for you to learn the technical side of it. And you know, you can rely on your natural talent as far as the mixing thing and everything goes. You can learn all that. I can't teach you how to be you. That's on you, and I can't teach you, you know, what type of heart to have, except for by the example of how I live my life. But that works for me. You just have to be, as especially as women, you have to just kind of be more self-aware and knows what works best for you in a setting with a bunch of people.
That's awesome. And just going back around to like the special skills thing, Fela, when you moved into New York City, you touched on in your article that there was a special skill you took up driving a box truck, right? Like not even related to sound, that made you invaluable, right?
Oh, I mean, yeah, you do what you got to do to stay in New York City, and no hookups and no tours yet. And you're just doing every small gig in Brooklyn and New York City you can find. So yeah, I ended up working for sound companies, driving, either like Sprinter vans or box trucks. Hey, I messed up a box truck going through Central Park. Just the top going through them tunnels. Like, hey, what are you gonna do? That's what insurance is for. So yeah, I mean, I worked at a place called Bandigo, which we delivered vans to touring musicians. That didn't help me get nary a gig, but it was cool. And it made it, you know, I paid bills in between. And at night I did my $50 a night gigs. And, you know, that also coincided with Claire at some point. Like I would deliver vans on the weekends and, you know, whatever it took to stay here and make it happen. And again, like, you know, for Bryony, it happened at 15. For me, it happened at 30. So I had a totally different mindset. And I, you know, then if it had happened for me when I was younger, I was just ready at the time. Like, again, like it was like, this is going to have to happen in the next couple of years, or I have to move on at some point. But, you know, doing odd jobs to get to what you want in the long run, I mean, that's just part of this. Because before I lived in Miami before I even moved to New York City, and I was working at all the major, like all the theaters and stuff. You know, I was pretty much full-time A1 engineer in South Florida, but I knew that I could do better and I had to make a move. It was either LA or New York, you know, that all the gigs that I wanted to have, though, that's where those engineers were coming from. So it was like, all right, well, I got to make that sacrifice of living next to the beach and and having a good time in South Florida. You know, it's just sacrifices that you have to make, whether, you know, to keep yourself afloat. Cause I didn't really, you know, I didn't have help from parents or anything. So it's just like, hey, you get some roommates, you do what you got to do.
I really like hearing that you gotta get on towards taking that first couple steps towards your goal, right? And Michelle, you talk about how you came from a small town with real traditional values, and you kind of had to like put your bootstraps on and leave town, and there weren't a lot of people in support of you doing that, but you knew that was where you were headed. Could you talk a little bit about just like making that jump?
Yeah, so I decided in high school that I wanted to be a recording engineer, and I grew up in a tiny little town in the middle of coal country, population of about 4,000 people, where you graduated, you got married, and if you were a woman and you wanted a job, you worked at a factory or the mall, and that was pretty much it. And that just wasn't going to work for me. So I kind of had to find my own way. I no one in my family was musical. I had no connections with the music business. I lived about as far from the music business as you could. And in high school, I told my guidance counselor when it was that, time to start thinking about college, I wanted to go to college for recording engineering. Well, you can't do that. You have to find a real job. That's not a real career. So I had, my no help from school. My family, and I grew up, we were pretty poor. So like my family didn't have any money, and they also wanted me to go to college to get a real job so I could help support the family. And, so everybody just thought I was crazy. And when I would tell people I wanted to be a recording engineer, they thought that meant DJ. And I said, no, I want to make records, not spin records. So I ended up going to college for a year, majoring in music. And I had one music course, and I knew this isn't going to get me anywhere. So I found a school in Ohio, the Recording Workshop, which was a month-long program in basic recording engineering. And I went there, I enrolled, and I went to that school. And after that, I came back home and got a job at a new radio station where I wanted to make their commercials. I wanted to record their commercials. And they said, that's great, but you have to sell them first. So I ended up selling radio advertising for months, and then at that point, I had a cousin who had just moved to Nashville. So she invited me to come and stay with her and try and get a job. So I took a bus to Nashville from Pennsylvania. It was like a 16-hour bus ride to Nashville. I think I was about 19 at the time, and get there and spent 3 weeks walking around Music Row. And this is back in the days where there was, studio after studio after studio. And I was walking around, knocking on every single door, handing out my resume, which was, the Recording Workshop and WMGH, and realizing very quickly, I still had no idea. I had no idea how to get into this business. I had no idea what I was doing. But I spent 3 weeks handing out every resume I could to every studio and just being turned down and told, no, we're not hiring. Went back to Pennsylvania. And at that point, I think I took like a part-time job, and I found a local band that would let me mix them. And then I discovered Full Sail and decided I was going to enroll in Full Sail. And, it's like where there's a will, there's a way, because my family had no money, and Full Sail was stupid expensive. And my part-time job wasn't going to pay for it, but I somehow managed to, scrape together the money and get enough loans to go and put myself through school. And, and that was the start. Like once I got there, that was the first time people actually supported my dream. People said, yeah, you can do this. It's a real job. It's a career, and we can help you get there. And so after I graduated, I started working, and that's, where it all began. But it was pretty much all on me, because no one understood what the job was, back then. Like it's still even, people, we tell them you do concert sound, people really don't understand what that is or think it's a career. And, it was kind of like, I just had to find, my way and keep, every time a door closed, just find another one that opened, and it's back to that whole thing where, you're going to hear no a lot, and you have to persevere, and you have to just keep showing initiative and showing up and persevering until you get where you want to be.
Michelle, what exposed you to wanting to be a studio engineer?
Since I was a little kid, music was a huge part of my life, and I played piano all through school, but like I'm not a musician, but I loved music. And my mom had a really eclectic record collection, and I would remember laying in bed in my room with the headphones on and listening to it was Queen, Day at the Races and Night at the Opera, those two albums, which, when you listen to them in headphones and it's in the 80s, when that music is new, it blew my mind. Like, I just remember they're laying there listening, like, how did they do this? How do they make this sound this way? And that just kind of set me on track. It's like, I would read every every album I would memorize the liner notes, on the record, like the, band names, the engineer, producer. And I knew that every single record had this person called a recording engineer. And I didn't know what that was, but I thought, well, they've got to be important because they're on every single record. So that's where I just started looking into it. What does a recording engineer do? And how do I do that? So.
Yeah, Dana and I actually started in recording studios as well, right? Dana, do you have any experience with educators? We've got a question here about how can educators support young people looking to get into this field? I actually used to teach little mini sidebar classes at my recording studio back before recording studio or recording schools were huge, rather. Do you have any advice on how an educator like this could help support young people?
Again, I'm self-taught. I learned by asking questions and, getting lucky enough to get hands-on experience. So I really have no experience of learning sound in the classroom. And maybe somebody else can answer that better.
I went to school also to be a recording engineer, but we had like 4 days of live sound, and I don't feel like it was full at all.
Do you still teach as well, Amanda?
I did. After I went back and I taught the live sound course at SAE, and at that time it was 2 weeks. So I was like, okay, this is better. But I do teach sometimes, and I just think people have to be honest and just offer real world practicality with it. It's not something that you're going to get just by reading. You're going to have to do it. And I think educators and engineers just have to be more open to being more hands-on when they are imparting the information to people who are asking. And I just think you have to be more hands-on about it and not, there are plenty of great books, and it depends on how you learn, but eventually you're going to have to do it and just get your hands on it, like twist the knob. And we who are in position to offer that have to be open to giving those opportunities.
Bryony, do you ever take students under your wing?
I haven't mentored somebody all the way through a career or in their education, but I get asked quite a lot to go and talk at some of these big rock schools that have come up, particularly, I don't know about in America, but in the UK there's quite a lot of them now. And I think the thing I always press is very similar to what Amanda is saying, is that actually there's very little of it you can teach in a classroom environment. It's got to be, you've got to be hands-on, because the vast majority of the skill set, particularly at the beginning, is damage limitation. It's managing with what you've got, as opposed to being given this slick set of equipment that all works perfectly and sounds good in the first place. So I think, that it was like back to the very first question about when you're ready to move up. And I would always say it gets easier. It gets easier as you get further up. The pressure's more, but in terms of the actual job, you're dealing with, a lot more kind of consistent factors when you're in a production tour with your own PA, with your same console every night, than you are in a club where you don't know if it's all going to work. You don't know if it's even been set up right. You've got different microphones, again, some of which don't work. So actually, it's one of those things. And so when it comes to education, I think it's impossible to actually give it. That's why, Amanda, this 4-day course, 2-week course, there's no meat, there's not enough meat in the kind of education part of it to make it last. And anyone who tells you it is doesn't really know what actual live engineering really takes.
There's a lot of trial by fire in our industry, that's for sure. I'd love to hit on a couple more of these questions specifically about that. There's a question here from Nora. She wants to know if you're miking a grand piano, and this is funny enough, something I had to do at the Barclays Center. You're miking a grand piano surrounded by a rock band, or in my case, on a thrust headed out in front of the PA. How does the piano player hear themselves in all that racket? Who wants to try to take a stab at that?
A closed piano top is first off.
My favorite piano miking technique is a couple of DPAs and a 58 and on a piece of foam in the sound hole. That is, you carve out a bit of like around 800 1K and send that to their ears or to their wedge. I've never had feedback issues with that.
Yeah. And like I mentioned before, I actually use this microphone, 2 of these on any grand piano I've worked with. And for me, I just kind of know in the background, the manufacturer of this mic used to work at AKG. So it's kind of like a knockoff of a 414, but without the crazy high-end color that like goes nuts in a monitor speaker. So I chose this one because it was just nice and flat and it sounded naturally like what the piano was doing. But yeah, if you're dealing with, which I dealt with having an 18-piece jazz orchestra around the grand piano, you at least got to go down to half stick. You can't have a full open grand piano next to all of that stuff that's going down. So you have to like close the lid. And then, yeah, either, put your pianist on ears or on a monitor. And that's usually it. It's not that crazy, actually. It's just
Dana,
like placement.
Fela, do you mess with polarity or phasing when you use both of those microphones on the piano?
No, not usually. I mean, if I hear that going on, but I've never personally heard that. And I kind of have them, I'll have them on a tall boom stand and just like one, more towards the, low at, the low end, and then one more towards the high end. And there may be kind of against each other like this, because I mean, it's a cardioid pattern. So no, I haven't had any trouble. I mean, and I deal mostly with jazz and natural acoustic stuff. So I don't particularly have like synths going on as well. I don't have a bunch of other noisy stuff. Because acoustic to me is just, it's a lot easier to handle. I know where the audio is coming out of, and it's a person playing and they're very consistent. So because the people I work with, they like teach at Juilliard and stuff like that. So they're super particular on how they play, and it's always the same. So I've been lucky with that, because I know that can be all over the place. So
there's also sorry.
Go ahead. I'm just
I was going to say also, because I work with a lot of loud ass bands. If I have the budget, I'll bring out a Helping Steel pickup, which is a 3-channel pickup. You install it under the string on the soundboard, and you can close the lid, have the lid open. The lid open always sounds better, but you'll have a low, mid, and high pickup, and you can really carve that EQ and make it sound great and natural, and not get as much of bleed from, say, a drummer who happens to be playing right next to a grand piano, which is a nightmare. But the Helping still works. Dynamics. I mean, you use a combination of dynamic and condenser is essentially my trick. But yeah, the Helping still is pretty cool.
Bruce wants to know, when using a wireless microphone setup, are you setting things to mic or line output, and why?
I set it to mic because it gives you more control of the gain at your end.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, the same.
Let's see. Best compressor setting for a drum set.
For like the drum bus, I guess.
Let's go with drum bus.
The bus. I mean, yeah. I mean, I'll start off with like I'll even like 2-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio, and then go like -10 threshold, give it back a little bit, and then I have to hear you play. But I'll usually start with something like that.
Hey,
Yeah,
Michelle.
again, that's with style,
Yeah.
Yeah.
depending on, you know, what you want to get out of it. If you want those drums to hit, then you might want to tighten up the compression a bit. If not, you know, a little light. If it's dynamic, just really depends on style.
Itel wants to know if our mixes are a form of art that should be copyrighted.
No, it's only to be enjoyed that night. Unless I'm doing a live recording, which I did a lot for Christian, like high definition 96, 24 recording. So that may come out later one of these days, but I'm mixing for your experience. Realize that people have been saving for a month to see your show, or they're like hanging out with friends they hadn't seen in a while. Like, what you do is like a culmination of so much happiness. And I'm just trying to move that forward with great sound. So that's how I kind of think about it.
I think I've read a couple different dialogues, debates, arguments, whatever you want to call it, about you having a show file, for example, in a console, and somebody else comes and uses it. As a house engineer, there's often been times that an artist will bring a sound engineer that was maybe a recording engineer and not a live sound engineer. So I'd basically get the mix together, and then they'd be writing the faders and essentially using my mix. I can understand why people would be territorial about the work that they've done. However, the way I approach it is this is one team, visiting engineers, house crew. So, you got to kind of have to put your ego aside at some point. I haven't heard yet a good argument why that property becomes your intellectual property that you can charge for. But I'm curious to hear if I would like to be proven wrong, just to get that perspective.
I think on the live side, I'm with Fela. Like, it's the experience. Now, if you are a recording engineer or mixing engineer, that's different. And like she said, if your live show becomes a record, make sure you're compensated somehow. Copyright may be a bit of a stretch, but like, make sure that you are accredited and that you are compensated in a fair way, especially as a recording engineer, if you're going to go that route, because you are a heavy part of the reason why the song is the song, especially if you're a good recording engineer. You're not just sitting there hitting record or 3 on Pro Tools, like, you are part of the reason why the song it is what it is. So, you would have to have that conversation with the artist and whomever else. But as far as on the live side, it's an experience. One, especially if you're on tour, you're already getting paid, your salary or whatever, and it's about the experience. And it's not.
I will say that I did get an album credit as the band's live sound engineer that I've been touring with for the past 5 years, and that just felt really nice. Didn't need, and of course they credit me for any of the live stuff that goes out, especially like festivals will film a set and put it on YouTube later on, and the band is always very adamant that I get my credit. But yeah, you shouldn't expect your show file, your USB to be this like financial commodity.
But also you can use your mixes as a commodity. That was what I've done. Even if it wasn't the band who told me to post, I'll ask the band, hey, I really love this show. Can I post this on my YouTube? Like, that was how I got in the game. Like, I had no hookups. It was just like the artist found me via this vehicle. So, I mean, I basically did make a bunch of money off of these $50 gigs because that was what got me in the door in the first place. That commodity gave me the in for the next level. So if you use it that way, maybe not, oh, I'm going to sell this or like do some NFT with it. I don't know. But I think you can still use it that way. Like that's the way you can make money with it. Yeah.
I used to make a Tumblr with all like my late night TV show band mixes that I've done. Which definitely helped me get jobs and festival mixes and that sort of thing. But yeah, I was talking primarily about just like a show file. Like, that's like, I just don't see how you can use that in good faith to make a buck.
And like I even mentioned earlier, I kind of saw what everybody was doing. It's kind of the same. And I've looked at a lot of different show files. It's not really different. It's not a lot going on. You shouldn't have to do a lot. First of all, it's the natural sound coming off of an instrument or that synth or whatever. You're giving that natural sound. You shouldn't have a crazy ratio and but it does happen. It depends on the room as well. But a lot of that stuff is so close. I can't see that ever coming about because I literally seen it myself. So
there's also
I would also say like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, go ahead. Go ahead, Dana.
Now I was also going to say, I've learned so much because I didn't go to school. I asked questions and asked people how they were doing things, and they were generous enough to share their experience and their knowledge with me. So, I want to pay that forward and share my experience and knowledge. And, if somebody wants to use my starting page for a show, I'm not going to be like, no, that's mine. I feel like the attitude should be, like, I don't know. I just like, if you're going to be generous about it, that's going to help somebody else get a leg up.
Yeah. And I was also going to mention that a lot of artists at a certain level, when you sign the tour agreement, it'll be written in there that any, I can't think of the word, but like any material that's produced, during your employment belongs to them. So basically that's, saying that the show file belongs to the artist. And that's something that if you're working with an artist who wants to put that into the contract, then if you want any kind of credit where if you're, if they're going to be making live recordings of or you're going to release live recordings of their show that you did, that's a negotiating point to, okay, well, this is, you own this, but if you're releasing, any recordings that I made, then I want credit for whatever you want to negotiate. But I think the big time where it comes into, where it becomes an issue is if someone is being replaced on a tour, and it happens, by no fault of their own, the artist or the management found someone cheaper. So they're going to replace the front of house engineer or the monitor engineer who's been with them forever for someone cheaper. And that's where it becomes an issue. It's like, well, I'm not going to give you my show file because you're taking my job. So that's, I think where I've seen it as an issue. But if you're leaving a tour and they've got to, find a replacement, it's kind of, well, if you want to do the right thing and give the oncoming engineer your file to start with, it's up to you. I know personally, like I hate starting with someone else's file. I've come into several gigs where I've replaced the engineer who had voluntarily left, and I hate using somebody else's file because you never have any idea what's going on in there, really. I mean, how deep it goes, and you can really get yourself into problems. But
I was going to say anybody, I feel sorry for anyone taking any of my show files on in that respect. Good luck to them, basically.
Yeah.
Yep.
This next question is pretty important to our female listeners. I'm probably going to guess that it'd be important to anybody listening, but especially the females on today. Anna asks, how do you synchronize work in the music industry with your family life? Bryony, I absolutely love your article. You spend a good chunk of it talking about that it can be a massive compromise on your life to take a long touring career. Some people see it as a massive adventure. Can it be both? Have you been working towards your long-term goal of having a family without dropping your career?
I was 8 weeks pregnant when lockdown hit. So I have the best lockdown time baby, but I haven't told anybody on social media. This is the only forum in which I would feel comfortable doing so because of my concerns about how it will affect my career. And I would say, in all honesty, I mean, I waited until I was 40 to have a baby because I know that it takes, you have to throw your whole life to get anywhere in doing this. And anybody who tells you differently is not being honest with you. And I think to try and balance family life and until you're ready to actually compromise your career to try to make the family life part of it a priority is, you know, that's the way up you have to make. And I think it's impossible because and I don't know how it works in so much for you guys in America, but certainly here, you've got to be able to say yes, 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 and you miss everything in your real life. You miss birthdays, weddings, funerals, the whole lot to actually to get anywhere and to be taken seriously. And it's a sad, sad fact. And I don't know if it'll ever change, but I think, you know, to get your foot in the door and to have a career where you can make a living, you have to compromise your family life. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. And Bryony, I'm actually in that club with you. I have a 3-month-old daughter, and I avoided telling anyone, including the internet, until a few weeks ago, actually. And my favorite sound girl texted me and was like, "Congratulations on breaking the internet," because there was just like, no one could believe it. Like, no way.
Exactly what would happen if I genuinely think my phone will stop ringing if people know I have a baby.
Yeah, and that's definitely the risk I've decided to take, and it's super sketchy. I also have the pleasure of loving our host here today, Carrie Keys. She has 2 grown, wonderful girls and has had an incredible career in the industry. So it can be done. How can it be done is really where we are right now. Michelle,
Carrie definitely helped me make the decision that it was the right thing to go for. I have to say, I had a lovely conversation with her about it. So thanks.
And I'm almost 40 as well, so I waited a long time. It wasn't something I decided to do right away. And I remember my very, very first panel in my 20s at AES, and one of the first, you know, they're asking the guys all these questions about tech and gear, and then it got to me, and the first person that raised their hand goes, "When are you going to make time for a family?" And I was like, dang, dude, I'm 23. Like, kick your butt, sit down. Michelle, you married someone in the industry. How's that going? Has that helped with keeping your foot in reality?
Yeah, we've been together 27 years, but we met on tour, and we became best friends, and it just worked out. Like, I had never planned on getting married just because I knew no one, you know, the boyfriends I had couldn't handle long distance relationships and, you know, me not being there. So I just kind of put it aside, like, well, this is what I want to do with my life. I don't care if I ever get married. And, you know, when we met, he was a lighting guy, now production manager, but it worked out, you know, because we both understood the industry. We understood what it takes. We understood what's going on, you know, rather than how can you let your husband be gone for 6 months at a time, you know, that kind of stuff. So that's why it worked, because we both came from the same place.
My partner is a lighting guy turned production manager as well.
My partner's in finance and thinks I'm the coolest person in the world. Dana, what's keeping you grounded? How do you feel like a real person when you're not touring and running around the world?
You know, touring is such a difficult lifestyle physically and mentally. You know, I had to hit bottom before I could realize, oh, I'm not taking care of myself. And And then, I just decided to spend more time on making sure that I was healthy. I like to work out every day. I bring like resistance bands on the road because they're easy to pack. And I like strength training. And also it makes loading easier when you have some muscles on your arms. I also love to eat. I will save my per diems and treat myself to really nice Japanese dinner as much as possible. And then just in general, just keeping everything in check that is pretty prevalent on the road, like alcohol. Essentially, it's just really easy to treat your body horribly, and I think if you focus on your health, that can help make all the other difficulties of touring much easier, and recovery much easier from getting off the road. And also just keeping in touch with friends for the mental health aspect of it. Definitely keeping, letting your friends know where you are, letting them know when you're home as well. So.
How are you staying balanced, Amanda?
I'm a believer, so my faith plays a big part in me staying balanced and centered. And I keep in touch with my family, especially my mom, who, like, people here in Memphis have no clue. Like, what I do is so grand, so it's just like keeping in touch with people that will keep you grounded, especially someone like a parent who's like, girl, sometimes helps me, and I appreciate that. And all my close friends have been my friends since either middle school, high school, or college, before I even knew this life. So it's just keeping in touch with people and my faith. And like Dana said, staying healthy too. You gotta, if you have a why, and I mean, what good are you if to the job or to the life or whatever if you're not healthy? And so that plays a big part. I just watch what I eat. I don't deprive myself. Like she said, I'll save up my per diem and go have a steak dinner, and I take advantage of my off days. A lot of people want to hang out or do things. I will either stay in my room or go walk by myself on my off days, because I'm a true introvert. So I need time to refuel to be the best me. And I mean, that just goes back to being, self-aware and knowing what you need.
I'm glad I'm not the only one FaceTiming my mom at front of house. I'll totally like set her up on the console and walk away, and my my system tech walks by and is like, "Hey, Jan."
I always bring on the LMA tour. When our stop in Memphis, I had my mom cook. I took them to the house. Like, I was like, we are like stripping all of this down and just being regular people today, because we needed one. And like it was a good time. Everybody was very thankful that that we had that day to just be normal people.
Fela, who's your support system?
My friends, like my business partner, Dennis, because and my mom, I talk to her all the time, telling her what's the latest. As far as that, I mean, I never go out that long. I feel I'll go out for like a month, maybe month and a half, but I'm not out for like 5 or 6 months. So I don't ever feel that far away from my people, or, so that's been really good, actually, that I don't feel that, oh my God, I miss out on so much. I was married, and it didn't work out because he wasn't in the business, and he didn't get what I was doing and how much work it takes. And I made, I kind of made, I mean, I wouldn't say mistake, but it's like, life happens, but I agree with all of you. I mean, as a woman, I remember reading this in like, I think it was Andrew Carnegie's biography, and he was saying how, I mean, women can be just as successful as men, but you will have to shift that timeline on when you can do a family, So I keep that in mind, and one day I think I do want to do that, but I'm open, and yeah, I don't feel too far away from people. It's not, I don't have as much isolation with the way that I toured. So yeah, that kind of helped out.
I think too, you have to give yourself permission to go for the goals that you have. It's okay.
That too. Yeah. and if you can't go along with that, I mean, it wasn't that he was a bad person, but it was just like, oh, this ain't gonna work out. So right. I can't, I got this thing that's, unfortunately even bigger than you. Yeah. And I can't not do it. And now I'm doing the studio thing as well and growing that. So I mean, yeah. So that that's how it is.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with a group of my friends this morning, actually. Like, yeah. Am I selfish for either not wanting kids or, pushing this back? You just have to give yourself permission to go for what you want to go for, whatever that may be. If it's having kids, like, okay, give yourself permission to make a sacrifice. And the other way around, if you want to be like Grace and Bryony, like, just set a time. Hey, I'm going to wait till this time and then make this happen. You just have to not feel the pressure of everyone else and just give yourself permission to build a life that you want, because you are able to have it.
It really helps when they have a global pandemic just at the time you do it as well.
Yeah. Well, the whole industry was waiting for us. Like, we'll just wait. Y'all have your kids and then we'll get back to it. Okay, you good? All right, let's go.
All right, let's go.
Let's do another question. I'd love to hear from all of you on this, and then we'll probably wrap it up. Rachel wants to know, what is the hardest and the best part about your job? Dana, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, I'm obsessed with music, and I get to live in music every day on tour. And especially live music, just the energy is, I feel like there's a great transfer of energy between audience, performer, myself. It can be so satisfying when you get that mix just dialed in and you get to just enjoy the show. And I also love traveling. I've seen a lot of the world, getting to go to Japan 13 times and Australia and Iceland and South America. I mean, the world is just such an incredible place. And when you especially when you get a day off in your favorite city and you get to see your friends all over the world abroad, it's really rewarding. As I said before, it's very tough on the mental and physical health. You have to have a lot of stamina. You have to be able to acclimate. You have to be able to, you have to have tenacity. And really stay strong. It can be a challenge. You also have to be forgiving, because everybody's going to have a bad day once in a while, and it's not like a situation where you get to go close your door at the end of the day. You might like just get to pull a curtain on a tour bus bunk, and just know when to be supportive and when to give people space. So yeah, there's a lot of intuition involved, and you have to trust that, and just take care of yourself and take care of the other people on the crew and in the band and on the bus. So yeah.
Bryony, do you have a note on this, or do you have to go? Oh, do we get to meet the little one? We've kept everyone up.
He's going to desperately want the computer now. Hang on a sec.
Wow.
Everybody. So that, much like Dana, I mean, I was into music as a kid. I desperately wanted to play all sorts of instruments, and I was never any good at any of it. And then suddenly, as a live sound engineer, I'm over all those amazing musicians, and I'm turning them up or down. And it's like being the best at every single instrument and singing all at the same time, all at once. And I think it's like, without sounding like it's a power trip, it's just, you are so in that music, but you're not just in the piano, you're not just in the guitar, you're in all of it, and nothing can beat that feeling in the whole world. Turning that up really loud is the best feeling.
That's awesome. And is there a hardest part? Anything you want to touch on?
Looking at the hardest part, I think. I don't know how. I just genuinely don't know how you go away for months and months and months when you have to sit at home. That's going to be the hardest part. It's yet to come.
It's yet to come, and it is a new chapter. And what I've heard everybody in this panel say over a couple of different topics is that you don't say no, don't take no for an answer. You do the right next indicated step. You move forward in the direction of your dreams, and it's going to happen, you know, because you did the next right thing in the right order. And it might seem too big, but hey, you know, when I was 19 saying I was going to mix arenas by the time I'm 30, that felt too big, and I did that and then some. So
that's the best way to look at it. That's the most amazing way it's ever been framed to me, so thank you. Yeah,
of course. Fela, what's the best part? What's the worst part? What should people know?
The best part is that you can use your own creativity to get into this. And I mean, whether that's who you're networking with or what you're creating to get to where you want. I mean, the worst, I have to kind of, I don't even know. I can't even really think of the worst personally.
You did touch on that one of the hardest parts of your career was actually leaving Claire Global, right? Because you'd kind of made it to a sense, and then you knew your next goal, and you had to like leave something, right?
Oh no, that wasn't hard at all. I knew at the time, if I got a year at Claire, I could work anywhere I wanted to in New York City. So I had perspective on that. Because of certain things, I knew I wasn't going to mix there. So, but I had the knowledge and I had the confidence by the time I left that, I'm on the level of this. I just have to I have to creatively get to this thing. And like I said, that's when creativity, I love it. It was just like, how do I get around this? And that gets me excited, which can be a bummer. It can be depressing to a lot of people, but I personally like that. Okay, let me see what we can do then. If I'm getting no everywhere, I can get around this person. I can get to the artist. Why do I need to go through the sound company? Why do I need to go through the management? How can I, I was always on that. I could figure my way around it. And then once I did it, it's like the biggest confidence, like I already had confidence and it was like through the roof. It was like, okay, I can do whatever I want to. And now it's like pushed me into now doing my studio and really going harder on building a business, that I would like as big as a Claire. I was very inspired working at Claire. The fact that it came from two brothers and, they started out with Frankie Valli and the Four Seat, like their backstory to what it is now and the third generation now running, that whole show. And basically they own a town. Like, I'm like, wow, I want to do that with a business now, that kind of stuff. And I got to go to Skywalker Sound with Leslie Ann Jones, and I saw that set up. I was like, oh, now I want my own property. Like now the thought process is so much bigger because nobody thought I could do live sound. So I'm like, oh, now you're not going to really believe what I'm going to do next. So really, I it's all been a confidence builder in everything that I do that, oh, okay, You can tell me no for, a while, but I'm going to get around it. So in all, it just built up a lot of, great stuff that I know when the going gets tough, I can make it happen. And once you know that, nothing can stop you. So I don't really have a bad part about that. I've enjoyed the heck out of doing tours. Right before the pandemic, actually, I told Christian that I wasn't going to go out on tour anymore. So I left that gig, and I wanted to concentrate on this place and building that next thing, So, I'm always like seeing what's next and how can you move it forward. I do live shows. I'll still do it around New York, but I won't be going out like long periods of time anymore, because I just want to build my own Claire, my own huge multi-million-dollar business. So that's the next thing on my docket.
That's awesome to hear that you see what's next by exposure, by seeing what's next, by working for a Claire. You saw it was possible.
Oh,
by visiting Skywalker Ranch, you're like already building your small town in your head.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not sure if it's going to be South Carolina where I'm from or not, but somewhere.
And Sound Girls always encourages finding mentorship. I really, really want to remind everybody to go and read the articles, listen to the podcasts, find one of these gals that just like resonates with you, and then don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions, because I don't think any of us would be like, no, don't bother me. To see where you want to go next, you have to see where you want to go. If you never left your small town, Michelle, you probably would still be there. I don't know. No disrespect to the people in my small town. There are people back from my neighborhood still there, and I'm like, I don't know if I could have done that.
Same here, small town South Carolina. So yeah, you got to get out and see the world, because then you'll appreciate this country. For me, I always tell people, like, once you leave, when people talk junk about living here, I'm like, please get some passport stamps and see this country, see this world, then you'll understand. So until you see that and how people really live, yeah.
Michelle, what's the good and the bad of this industry? What would you want our listeners to know before they get in there?
For me, it's being able to be, to do two of my favorite things: travel the world and mix great music that I love and be a creative part of a great show, and to get paid for doing that, and it's really the greatest job in the world. The downside is, it can be brutal on your body, the schedule, the travel. It's a physical job. It's, 16 to 18-hour days. A lot of times you're not working in great conditions. You could be outdoors in a field in the hottest, ridiculous heat, hottest days of the years. You could be in stinky, smelly bars in the dark for weeks where you don't even see the sunlight. So that can be really hard. But another thing I love about it is the camaraderie. When you go on tour, you become a family, and you could start a tour with a bus full of 10 strangers, and by the end of the first week, you guys are closer than people you've known your whole life. You become family. You're like this little rolling community traveling around the world, and you build relationships and bonds with people that it's hard to do in a normal situation. And that also is one of the hard parts, is when the tour is over, you get the end of tour blues. Your little group of peeps that you've been with for the last year, spending your days off doing a pub crawl or just checking out the local museums or whatever. Those people that you've been surrounded with for a period of time are now, you all go your separate ways, and you can keep in touch via social media and the phone and whatever, but it's not the same as having your little group that you're with 24/7, and that you can just call up somebody and say, hey, let's go down the bar and get a drink, or let's go for a walk, or check out this bike trail, or whatever. They're on the other side of the globe, so that's a hard part.
I'm still on text chains with some of my tour roadies that make me so happy. What about you, Amanda? What's the good, bad, and ugly of this industry?
Same as Michelle. the fact that I get to do what I love to do and get paid for it, makes it feel like it's not work. Um, and that's just not you. A lot of people can't say they do that every day, that they're happy going to work. The average person go to work for 8 hours a day for 5 days a week. You spend most of your time at work and you don't like it. That sucks. So it is a huge blessing to be able to go to work and actually like what I do, and get paid for it. And the travel, like I love to travel. This pandemic, I didn't realize how much I loved just traveling. And the first time I was able to be in an airport, I was like, oh my God, I'm home in the airport. It was such a weird feeling, but it was like, yo, I am, even in a pandemic where everybody was like scared to fly, I'm so comfortable because I'm like, I know I'm being clean or whatever, but I'm just comfortable being on the plane. But I love traveling and experiencing different cultures and just seeing how, they live and seeing, they're regular people as well, and are going to work every day and being able to do what they love to do. So that's the upside. The downside is being away from family though, and having to make those different personal sacrifices. I've missed a lot of weddings and I've missed an uncle's funeral because I was on tour. So, you have to develop good coping skills and dealing with those types of things that you may have to sacrifice on missing out on, because you're out working and doing what you love to do.
This conversation has been absolutely awesome for me. I hope you all have enjoyed our afternoon together. If you have any additional questions, feel free to leave them on the Sound Girls Facebook page or in the comments section on YouTube. You're also welcome to hit up each and every one of us on our own socials and on Sound Girls. I know there are a couple of additional questions about how to handle some talent with attitude and maybe even how to set up a Yamaha console. Both Amanda and Fela are Yamaha lovers, so please hit them up. And don't hesitate to reach out to Sound Girls if you're looking for mentoring opportunities or want to get involved. We absolutely love all of you. And thank you so much, ladies, for your time today. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Bye.
You too.
Bye-bye.